Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel, Pivot to Inclusion. Once again, we are here to talk diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the topic of today is one near and dear to my heart. It's a stereotype that I have faced personally, and I think there is value in deconstructing it and sharing information to help others understand it. The angry Black woman. We're going to talk about that today. And with me, I have my business partner, Dr. Scott Herbst. And joining us, we have a very special guest, someone near and dear to my heart, one of my forever friends, Miss Maya Akai. Maya and I grew up in the same area. We have a lot of parallel lived experiences through the schools we went to. We even went off to the same college together. So, Maya, can you please let folks know a little bit about who you are and share, because I couldn't do your accolades justice. Just share a
I always,
few of them.
I always say I feel like I've lived many lives in just this one, which is interesting. Um, seriously, I wear many hats. I work in mental health. I'm a crisis intervention specialist in the emergency department. I have a master's in clinical counseling. And so that's kind of my mental health field I've been in for 20 years, but I've also worked in post-secondary education with it, social services. So I've really worked with like a lot of different populations from, gender, age, socioeconomic status, education, you name it. I've really got to have a lot of rich experiences with people working in the mental health field. Then I have the other side of me, which is broadcasting.
Yes.
So that was my initial undergrad degree at the University of Iowa. I did communication studies. So I worked in radio, actually sports talk. I was on 670 The Score for a bit, did the weekend overnights.
Wow.
And from there, it just kind of got in. Then I went to 1690 WVON and then had a chance to lateral over and do more of a traditional talk show that wasn't sports based. And that to me really drew it in because it allowed me to have a lot of salient conversations with people. Because at
Yes.
that time, 1690 is more of an urban station. So I got to really have salient conversations respectively with the Black community and others that would tune in and challenge and grow. And that part to me was amazing because so many of the things that I had experienced, others had. And then there was also the other side of that coin is people had different experiences, which gets into the whole thing about often with stereotypes, there's this ideal of homogeny, that people are the same. Okay, you may be the same in what you share, let's say, in regards to culture. You share
Yeah.
a culture, you may share a racial designation, something of that nature. But what people don't understand is when you drill deep into people, individual experiences make you who you are. And the minute you're stereotyped, it takes away your autonomy.
Oh,
So
there we go.
I
There
really
we
dug
go.
dug deep into that show. So now I actually do a podcast called Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, where we talk about, getting to the best version of yourself, which means challenging, you know,
Mhm.
all the things that have held you back, things that you have bought into. One of the things I always say consistently within my podcast is you have to do away with thinking things like fake it till you make it. Because if you fake it
Mm.
till you make it, it means you are not embracing who you are in the moment. And being present is so important if you're ever going to grow and change.
There we go. Maya, okay, let's get into this. See, now this is you're lighting me up right now. Okay, you know I could talk about this all day
I
long.
know, I
You
know.
know I could.
We have.
Okay, let's let's get into it. Maya, this angry Black woman and these stereotypes, because the angry Black woman actually is just one. I mean, when you think about some of the roles and stereotypes and tropes attached to us as Black women, I can remember the sapphire,
Mhm.
this sexual vixen. I know the mammy,
Mhm.
the caretaker.
Yes.
But what makes the angry Black woman, because all of them are damaging, but I think with Sapphire, that's limited to the younger woman. The mammy, we kind of look at the mammy as an older woman, but this angry Black woman, I think most Black women living in the United States can relate to this one or relate to the experiences of trying to avoid having the stereotype attached to you.
It is. And to me, it kind of has a counterbalance with the angry Black woman and the independent woman, the strong Black woman. Whereas, you can conquer anything. There is no weakness for you. Those two things go very closely hand in hand. You talk about, I think, the modern idea of stereotypes. I do agree with you with the sapphires tend to be younger, and if you turn on certain artists, I think they fall right into that
Yes.
designation of seeing it that way. Um, the mammy part was probably far more when we talk about more of the turn of the century. Gone with the Wind was a huge part of that. That idea, with Hattie
Yes.
McDaniels. So to me, I don't think you see as much as that. Now it's more of the caretaker piece. So you're right, but with the angry black woman, what's interesting, and you and I have talked about this, I said, part of what is often difficult is having people understand that this stereotype runs a ribbon through every racial group, but it's a matter of perception. So when black women show passion or be very direct in their thoughts,
Mm,
you're angry. Even if you have a right to be angry, you're still angry. You know what I
that's
mean?
right.
Um,
That's right.
on the flip side, because I'm half Latino, you get the fiery Latino, passionate kind of thing. It's not looked at negatively. It's like, oh, you're fiery. What's interesting, in often terms, when you look, um, Asian women are often looked at being docile, which they hate because many are not that way at all. So if they speak up, it's, and this also kind of aligns a little bit with white females. You're finding your voice. You're finding your strength. You're stepping out. Do you see the
Yes.
difference
There
in
is a difference.
those narratives for each group of women, so to
There,
speak?
there is. And I will tell you where it relates to emotion, and I'm curious to know how this has impacted you. But what I learned to do early on, and this is incredibly sad, but I learned to mute myself, mute my emotions in certain situations because I learned it wasn't safe for me to express emotions because they would more often than not be misinterpreted.
No,
And that
yeah, I'd agree with
that
that.
misinterpretation would oftentimes result in some sort of punitive consequence for me.
Yes, you're right. I agree with that. It was very much, I spent a good portion of childhood, adolescence, even young adulthood, muting a lot of my fiery passionateness, so to speak.
Yes.
I was an outspoken child from day one. So I already had one strike going against me.
You were, Maya.
I
I
always,
remember.
I was the girl who was arguing with the ref on the basketball
Yeah,
court.
yes, you
Are
did.
you kidding me? That's insane. I mean, so
You
I
did.
came into this world like, with something to say, so to
Yes,
speak.
you did. Yes.
And it was interesting because I did know at times, sometimes I would just fall back and not say something. But I realized there was a small caveat. This is what's interesting, and even a little bit of privilege. I can't tell you so much that I got the label of being an angry black woman, but this is why. People saw, oh, you're very articulate and you're educated. You're different.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
hence, I didn't fall into a stereotype of what people assumed that black people were like, so to speak.
Yes.
So that label didn't get strongly attached to me, but more of the independent, you're strong, you can handle anything, which was a detriment because then I thought I could and
Yes.
would suffer in silence because I was too afraid to lean into somebody else and to ask for help because guess what? That's not what I'm supposed to do.
That absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And then Scott, it looked like you had something to say.
There were like five different times I could have asked a question. What I'm thinking about now, what I'm interested in is where my mind was just wandering was actually towards like the recent presidential debate, not presidential, vice presidential debate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, where I saw a lot of like I was on edge for stereotype, right? And from I saw like 20 minutes of it, but in that 20 minutes, it looked like he was really just like egregiously taking advantage of, the moderator would be like, okay, that's your time, and he would just keep talking, and she'd say, vice president, and he'd just keep talking, and it looked to me like I don't know. I was really impressed with how she handled it in
Mhm.
terms just like I would say she was so centered, right? Like how she occurred to me was just centered, unflappable. Um, and I'm curious. So I'm curious. Like that's where my mind wandered, and I'm curious what you two guys saw there. given, because like I understand the stereotype of the angry black woman, like it's just in the culture. Um, and like probably if you did like a fill in the blank angry blank woman, like I'd write black in there, you know. Um, and but so I have this kind of like, you know, this like middle-aged white guy understanding of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious, but no real experience like walking into a room and having to manage myself so people don't see me like I'm an angry black woman, right?
Mm,
And so I'm curious. I'm assuming you both watched the debate.
yes.
Yeah. Um, and I don't want to interrupt the conversation now, but I would like to touch on that, like the perspective of that, you know,
Yeah.
from someone who's kind of like lived inside the skin of a black woman and what you saw there that I might be missing, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I tackle this one first, Maya?
You sure can.
Okay. From my lens, and this is to me, regardless of whether or not you're Democrat or Republican, what I saw Kamala Harris do on that stage was masterful. What I saw was a woman engaging in mental acrobatics because there were several points. And I saw it in her face. I saw it in her body language where she wanted to smack him across the screen, but didn't. You know what she did? And I knew it. I recognized it because I've had to learn to do it. She kept that smile on her face. She stayed polite. She watched her demeanor because the entire country is watching. And she knows if she is perceived as overly emotional, as angry, she won't get, they won't, people won't vote for her. So what I saw, I saw her calm and collected. I agree, but I recognized every moment where she was pissed. And what I got present to, especially after watching it and engaging with social media, that many white folks didn't, they saw calm, but they didn't recognize the pieces where she was showing some incredible restraint. And when she said that classic phrase, she said, "I'm speaking." And what a powerful representation that was, I think, for all women. However, it meant something real deep to me because how often have I sat in meetings, have I been engaged in conversations, and the white male interrupts, overspeaks, and silences me. So it was a powerful moment, and I think regardless of political party, what Kamala Harris demonstrated to me was what it really takes to be a black woman in the United States as a professional. What I'm curious to know your thoughts, Maya.
You know, you hit the nail on the head with that. It was clear that I could tell that she was using restraints, but she gave just enough body language to let you know,
She did it.
like, really? Like to let you know that he made a mental check to what he had said. I liked it when she said, "I'm speaking," because you know what?
I'm
I've done that.
speaking.
Because that's one thing, I'm not shy, and I've done that before. Like I wasn't done talking yet. So I have,
Oh,
so
yes.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem stopping people like dead in their tracks if they.
You know what, Maya? I love that in you
I don't
because
start.
my takeaway from that was what I will do is say, "Can I please speak? Can I finish?" Never again. That has been X'd out of my vocabulary. In 2020, Nasiah says, "I'm speaking."
And that's, you know, and I think you said for a lot of women, they could identify with that regardless to what type of woman that it was. But it was interesting because there were some people that I would watch read their Facebook post and they're like, "Oh my God, she's the smirk on her face and she's being so snarky." I was like, really? Okay.
Yes.
She's not gonna have a flat affect and not show some range of emotion, but she did it to me in a very tasteful way. And you're right. She knew that she was going to be judged not just as, you know, this is going to be your vice president, who we know vice presidents now carry far more responsibility in the scope of their job than they ever have. Let's say in the last
Yes.
20 or 30 years. The most
Mhm.
recent VPs have really done a lot of strong work. So you look at this person, and you think about that's one of the same things that Hillary Clinton struggled with was not wanting to show that emotion because as women, here's a general kind of, a label we get. They're so emotional. We're such emotional creatures, So hence, and what's anger? Probably the easiest emotion, obviously, to elicit from yourself. So, I understood that she had to have the composure, but I totally likened to the fact that she's an attorney. So
Yeah.
she knows how to have verbal volleyball with people. She knows how not to play her hand too hard. She can have a poker face because she comes from, that field where you have to be able to do that and have restraint, even if you don't agree with what's happening on the opposite side of the courtroom. So
Yeah.
in that part, she definitely had training on how to be masterful when she was at that podium.
Yes.
And she did well at
Yes.
it. So yes,
She
definitely.
did well. She did well. It's interesting. As you speak, I can go back to my childhood, but I think about some of the mentors that I have had in my adult life, Black women, older Black women who taught me, for lack of a better term, how to play this game, because it does become a game when your livelihood is attached to how you have to show up in the world. So I remember I was on faculty at Chicago State, and there was a white professor there, white female professor, who was giving me the flux about something. And I had one of the older Black women, she pulled me aside and she
What
said,
does that mean, the flux?
just, she was giving me a hard time,
Hard
Scott.
time. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to
Yes.
check in because I
Thank you for,
wasn't, yeah.
Break out your Urban Dictionary. You might get a little here and there. A little bit here and there.
she was giving me the flux, giving me a hard time. And one of the older Black women there had pulled me aside and she said, Nasiah, I want you to, I want you to go in her office, and I don't want you to lay a hand on her. But she said, I want you to kick her ass. And I didn't understand. I said, Doctor, what do you mean? She said, listen, don't you touch her. But I want you to get her in that office and I want you to kick her ass. Well, guess what? Nasiah learned how to kick somebody's ass without putting my hand on them. So I have appreciated in my life the Black women who have really been there and taught me how to toe the line. Because, Scott, you may not know this, but it's not easy for us. It's not easy for us to show up as Black women in this world. And a lot of us, what do we do, Maya? We depend on each other.
Mhm.
And Scott, you do know my work. I do a lot of mentoring of younger professionals. And it's really rooted in that, making sure that I give people the tools they need to get through this because I didn't always have them and I suffered. So, Maya, I want to ask you, who helped you along the way? Because growing up in Joliet, it was very segregated. I came from an all Black community and was educated in an all white environment, and it was incredibly traumatizing and difficult. And I didn't really get the tools that I needed until I was an adult. I know your experience was a little bit different.
It was different in the sense. So, like you said, went to private school, lived in the Black community for a short amount of time, and then we ended up moving
Mhm.
midway through my junior high years into at the time was becoming a mixed area, but it was still a small group of Black families that were there. But for me, it was my mother and my grandmother were so integral, obviously in being good role models and, telling me to have a voice and to speak up for myself. Like I said, I've never not had a voice. Um,
That's right.
so it
That
was
is
like,
true.
so it was more about understanding how to use it properly in situations. You don't engage in everything. And they were really good about that and having that insight. But I also had within my family, almost everybody pretty much had gone through private school. So we went to a school where like the family was known. so it wasn't
Yes.
so it wasn't so foreign. So I knew some of the families I had known for years just because some of their siblings had gone to school with some of my aunts and uncles and things like that. So I
Yes.
have to say that within initially my Catholic school, I cannot say that I really ever felt like an outsider. I can't say I had that experience. Now I can tell you, I remember some of the incidents of racism. I remember things that happened, but it wasn't across the board something that happened frequently. And one of the things I thought was interesting is I remember like the first day of kindergarten is I'm all like, excited about going to school. And my mom's having like a breakdown. I'm like, hey, I'll see you at noon, you know? And
Mhm.
she's like having this breakdown about dropping me off at school. She's like, I want to tell you something. Everyone may not like you and it's okay. And I was like, what? You know, that made more sense to me as I got older.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Everyone may not understand you. And that part was true. And I would have to say that though I felt accepted, I clearly was still aware of difference, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So to feel included in something, but yet to know that you're still different was very much a part of my reality. It really
Yes.
was. I was still aware that I was the Black girl that went to school there.
Yes.
Um, that became really aware, especially when we maybe would, because I also was in cheerleading. So when we would go to other schools, and there'd be like no other minorities, it was so clear to me that I was a different one. And I even had gotten a story from another individual who had went to another Catholic school, who was a cheerleader, and they were going to a Catholic school in one of the more rural areas, and she was not allowed to go to the competition because they wouldn't allow her to go at the other school. Now,
Yes.
mind you,
Wow.
this is a private school, mind you. So the
Yes.
fact that this, and it's Catholic, so the fact that this was allowed to happen still blows my mind. Um, I don't know where her parents would have been with that they allowed it to happen, because I know who would have shown up at the door of my school
Yes.
had that happened. My mother would have never let that happen. She would have been like, oh, no, you don't. And she would have called him out on it. So it was always about taking a stand, having a voice, but understanding everything isn't worth a fight. And I really got that from my mother and my grandmother, because they knew I was an outspoken. They knew I was outspoken from day
Yes.
one. So they taught me how to take that and to use that as a tool, opposed to it becoming something that was a detriment to me.
Absolutely. You were indeed blessed and very fortunate to have that support and mentorship r- close to home
Hmm.
in your mother and your grandmother. I remember in elementary school, again, I was an athlete, and I remember not being able, because I was the only little black girl in my class from first grade to eighth grade. And when it came time for us to play at certain schools, we couldn't go because I was on the team. And
Interesting.
they were, and I mean, I don't want to mention the towns, or maybe I should, but there are a couple surrounding towns
Hmm.
in surrounding Joliet, if you can remember, that at the time were incredibly segregated.
Hmm.
And
You can say
people,
it. Plainfield.
Plainfield,
You can say it.
Shanahan, Manuka,
Wilmington. Yes.
yes,
Yes.
Wilmington, all
Yes.
those little
Yes.
little
Hmm.
towns,
Hmm.
was dangerous for me to go play. So I remember the team being mad at me, like, we can't go because of her. And really, the school, they were attempting to keep people safe. But again, that's incredibly traumatizing, because what happens is my black skin becomes what? The problem.
That's interesting, because I remember there was no secret about Plainfield. There wasn't.
Yes.
I mean, granted, I think they've grown in leaps and bounds since the time that I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember dropping off a friend. We had done something at school, and she lived in Plainfield, and I gave her a ride home. It was me and my cousin. And I had to stop and get gas. And I go into the gas station, pump the gas, and it was probably like about 7 o'clock at night. And as I'm paying, this lady behind the counter, she goes, sweetie, you're going home, right? And I was like, yeah. She goes,
Yeah.
you make sure you drive out and you don't stop anywhere else. You go home. Me and my cousin didn't get it initially. It
Yeah.
took a minute before we realized what she was telling us is that it wasn't safe. And I
That's
was like,
right.
and that kind of blows my mind to think that that was something that was an issue to that degree, that two young girls wouldn't be safe driving home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me share this, and this definitely ties into this angry black woman, or who our society views or believes the black woman is. I was the victim of a very public crime. And I don't know if either of you have ever heard of bystander syndrome,
Hmm.
but I
Yeah.
was a victim of a very public assault, brutal. And there were people who were around, but nobody helped. Nobody helped me. And I always wonder, had I had blonde hair and blue eyes, given what was happening, if somebody would have jumped in. And when I say nobody helped, I'm telling you, hard legs was around. Hard legs meaning men. They were around, and nobody Nobody jumped in. And I, reflecting back on it, when Black women are in harm's way, whether it's us being assaulted in public or us going to the doctor and being kind of pushed away or pushed aside, the perception always seems to be, yeah, they can handle it. But it's never along the lines of, and this goes back to what you said earlier, Maya, we need to help. There's something around the conditioning in this country that moves in the direction of Black women don't get helped.
That's very true. That's been a long-standing stereotype that to me, I think it comes very strongly rooted, starting all the way back in slavery,
Hmm.
when Black women, we worked because obviously we were property. But even once you had the ending of slavery in 1865, Black women were actually able to secure employment, take care of their families. To a certain degree, we stepped into the role of being the man, the head of the household, not by choice, but by necessity, so to speak. And then
Yeah.
you also got through Jim Crow, you got vagrant laws, which this is where mass incarceration started for Black men, where if you couldn't find a job, you could then be incarcerated. Well, if you're a Black man in 1895, you're not finding work was difficult. And this became free labor. Many companies have a history being tied to using the labor of Black men when they were incarcerated. So Black women ended up carrying that responsibility of being the head
Yeah.
of the household. And by the way, what came with that is, oh, and now you are so very emasculating to men. Well, the
Yes.
issue turns out to be is when you are surviving, by the way, that was a whole process of surviving versus thriving.
Yes.
By necessity, we had to be those strong people so that our families could survive. And that concept has traveled with us. But the
It's with
problem is,
us.
it's not exactly the same anymore. And it has a negative connotation tied to it that, oh, Black women, they can handle it. They're not
Yeah.
weak. They're going to be okay. They can do it. And I'll tell you this: on the flip side, we often buy into it and don't want to show weakness.
Oh, there we go.
We do. I mean,
There
I'm
we
not. I'm not
go.
gonna say innocent of not sometimes playing into the role. We don't want to come across as being weak. That we
Yes.
need to be saved. It's
Yes.
rare you're ever going to see the word damsel in distress behind some Black woman's name. That's
It's rare.
it's rare. It's rare. And when you do see people like that, people always think that's very uncharacteristic. When, oh my God, she seems so demure and so soft and fragile. Those are words that generally do not get attached to when you describe Black women. Like when you talked about fill in the blank, Scott, about angry blank woman, and you said you would fill in Black. But what's interesting, you could say angry scorned woman. You don't even have to necessarily insert race, but we are so indoctrinating into this concept and this stereotype that we assumed that that's the appropriate word to fill in the blank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That implicit association. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about, because Scott and I are doing a lot of work with organizations and really helping to educate and help organizations navigate policy and procedure around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let's talk a little bit about how this stereotype shows up in the workplace. How does it get manifested? What happens? What are some potentials for trauma? I can reflect on my own experience in the workplace. Um, I would remain quiet when I should have spoken up. I would feel torn because I would go in certain work situations feeling or just knowing I couldn't be myself. And the thing with it is everything in my personal culture supported that. It's as a Black woman, as a Black person probably, but particularly as a Black woman, I believe we've come to accept the workplace and who you are just not in sync. You cannot show up to work authentically. I had a young lady several months ago who attended one of my trainings. And I had learned this new term, show up as your authentic self. And she said, well, Nasiah, I'm always my authentic self at work. And not 6 months after we did that, she did show up as her authentic self and she was fired from her position. So let's talk about how this impacts workplace culture and how it impacts everybody, but particularly Black women in the workplace.
You know, again, it's that stereotype of being angry kind of precedes you. Um, so if you, even if you're absolutely right in the situation and the position you're taking, if you have a right to be upset or angry or disgruntled, you have to be careful how you choose to approach it, because people, even if a situation, I'll tell you something that actually happened to me and it blew my mind. Seriously.
Mhm.
I had a situation where I was working for a school, not to be named, that's no longer open. And I had complained about, you're bringing people into this school that we know are not going to be successful at this, you know, and they're taking these loans out, they're going into debt, and then you're collecting money. It was, at the end of the day, it was like, I was honest about you couldn't go after these people. And we sat down and we talked about this, the president of the school in her office. I'm sitting here, she's across at her desk. We're talking about there's a good, at least 25 feet, if not more, between us and talking. And her door is open.
Mm.
So we then ended up having a meeting with HR because of some complaints that I had made, that I felt there were some things that weren't ethical. And in this meeting, and by the way, the girl who was over HR actually went to high school with her, which I thought was interesting. In this meeting, the president of the company said, and then she got aggressive and hostile with me and I felt afraid.
Cool.
And can I tell you, I was so blown away.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was a lie. I mean, from top to bottom.
Yes.
Like the door was open, people could hear the conversation. I never got out my seat. And I was so taken aback that she lied like that. I looked at her, I said, that's absolutely not true. I said, your door was open and I was sitting in this chair. I said, I never came anywhere near you. I said, why would you say something like that? I'm like, that's an assassination of my character. But either way, they actually bought what she said and I was terminated.
Wow, Maya.
And it blew my mind because I was like, this woman, I mean, when I say she lied, and the thing is, when I walked out the office, her secretary was sitting there and she looked at me, but no one was going to speak up and say, that's not true. She's lying.
Maya,
But think about that, how easy it was for them to assume that what she was saying was true at face value.
Yeah, I have a story to share too. But let me ask you this. Is it possible? Is it possible? Did she really believe you were threatening her? Because I've encountered that through the lens of a white person. Remember too, we are accustomed to crossing environments and switching and shifting. But if you're a white person and you don't come into contact with Black people, and what you are seeing Black people as is what you see on TV, your lens is these are scary, frightening people who are aggressive and could hurt me. So you may have sat up in your seat and to her, she lunged at me.
I'll tell you this. So I was at a different school and asked me to come there and work for her. So it wasn't like she didn't know me. But I'll tell you what the issue was. I met her where she was at mentally and emotionally and walked right past her. Mm-hmm. That was the issue. Mm-hmm. I am one to be known to be really, really cut close with my words. Seriously. Oh yeah. And the thing is, I put her in her place, and she struggled with that. I already knew, because here comes that position of power. See, I'm also that person that I can get another job, but what you won't do is disrespect me. What you won't do is, I'm not going to sit here and say what you're doing to these people are okay, because I know that it's wrong. And this is why the school is not being successful. And by the way, that's exactly why the school got shut down. So my thing was, I was trying to, you were arguing with me about numbers. And I'm like, look, there is nothing. This is what the truth is. You're bringing in people that can't be successful. I said, but you know this, and you've done this, 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 and this. And they had done things and tried to say that I did it. And I was like, I wasn't even here when that was arranged yet. So how did I have a part of that? I mean, it was just a lot of really unethical stuff that got called to the table. But she felt it was easy just to lie. But the thing that I thought was interesting is, I'm sure she felt absolutely small.
Yes.
Because I didn't back down on my conviction of where I was at with it. I didn't. I wasn't that person who didn't know how to articulate herself. I wasn't that person. So did she probably feel threatened to a degree? Absolutely. But it was based on my words, not on my actions.
Yes. Yes.
No. In that sense, yes.
I've I have been there. I have been there. And Scott, again, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I was just thinking about, well, people watching may not know, but Nasiah, I'm kind of obsessed with integrity, right? And there's not the here's what's interesting to me is that like I don't think it's unusual that she would attack you, Maya.
Mhm.
And and I'm calling that an attack, like a lie, right?
Right.
Um, it's not unusual that she would attack you because you were calling her out on integrity, right?
Hmm.
Because if you're running a business and probably you don't hold yourself out to as I'm here to prey on students and really get their money when I know they're going to fail out and then have a whole bunch of debt, right? Um, and one thing people do is when I lack integrity, when people lack integrity, I think it's a pretty common thing is that we get mean, you know, and it starts to look as though the world is attacking us, right?
Hmm.
Um, and what's interesting, so I don't think it's like unusual that if lying was going to be her thing, a way to get out of trouble, that she would do it. What is interesting to me is that probably it's a lot easier to lie and say like, oh, I was threatened by, like Central Park Karen, right? Who's like, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them you're attacking me, and they're going to come here and they're going to arrest you, right? And that being like kind of a known strategy, like I can just, you can just tell people the black person's threatening me, and the police will come get them.
That's a
Um,
thing.
yeah, no, I know it's a thing. Like
That's a
that woman in Central Park was like, well, like said it out loud, like, hey,
yes.
this is how it works, right? Um, that's what I was thinking. I did kind of have a question about it. I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think?
Hey, I've lived it, and I know I have shared with you, Scott. This happened to me in the past 6 months. A place of employment that I have been with for more than a decade. Um, I went to HR, senior leadership, and shared with them my concerns about the racism that I was experiencing there. And I was met with that. Now, both of you know me well enough where you've seen my
Met with
demeanor.
like, why are you attacking me? Or
I was met with,
okay,
I was aggressive, hostile. That's, I don't show up like that. So it was similar to your experience, Maya, is that because I didn't show up, what I probably didn't have because I was passionately talking about being discriminated against, what I probably didn't have was a smile on my face. And that was perceived and it was described as me being hostile and aggressive.
Mm.
And that is from my lens about me being a black woman, and again, the direction of power within the context of our culture, the pattern often is if you're black and you express something is wrong, you better be able to prove it. So the particular senior leadership person, HR person that I talked to, they outright said, and I don't even think they knew how wrong it was, I don't believe that, Nasia.
Hmm.
This is coming from HR and senior leadership. But think about this. Think about being burdened with being in a workplace. And I just attended a webinar today where over 50, they report that a study shows over 50% of Black people report racial discrimination in the workplace. Okay, but when we report it, people don't believe us. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? We work to live. So being in these environments and being subjected to this discrimination is tied into our survival. And that's what makes it so oppressive. And to me, that's why I'm so very passionate, Scott, and I've shared this with you about the work we do, because I know what it's like to have to show up day after day and not really be able to walk into and be who you truly are without contacting punitive consequences.
Hmm. True. Very, very, very true. I mean, and that definitely, I mean, I know I see it in my workplace all the time. And to a degree, some of it has been normalized. People like, I know you, so I can say this. And it's like, that's such a stereotype. Why would you, and I will call
Yes.
people like, that's very antiquated thinking you've got going right there. I've said that to people because we can actually have those conversations. I'm like, that's not
Yes.
appropriate. But you're right. It's just this, it's easy to assume like there's a person who works with my job who I know everybody sees her as an angry Black woman because she tells you exactly what she thinks with no filter.
Yeah.
There was actually two,
Yes.
like, I know for sure, without a doubt. I'm like, why can't she just maybe be just an angry person? Because there are other of us that work here who are not angry at all. You know what I mean? So, but you're right, within the workplace, that does frequently happen. There's a lack of understanding. I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people like to say to me, can you explain to me exactly what Black Lives Matters means? And I'm like, okay, I think it's kind of straightforward. But
Yes.
what people are hinged on is the Black part. That's the part that,
Yes.
that's the part that takes people off center with this. They're like, well, why is it just Black? Why can't it be all lives matter? I'm like, because Black Lives Matter is addressing a very specific issue that is unique to Black people. I said, white people or Black and brown people are being killed at a different rate, numbers, interacted with law enforcement different than white people are. So hence, that's where it comes from. And they're like,
Yes.
oh, I'm like, but what it isn't saying is that your life doesn't matter. It's saying in this specific situation, this is what the issue is. Our lives matter.
Yeah,
Do you get it? It's
absolutely.
not saying over the entire life experience that only Black Lives Matter. And it was interesting how such a simple concept, which means it's been so diluted at this point that people don't get what it's about.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
had to have that conversation multiple times. So the organization I work for, we actually did a moment of silence when it was like warmer outside, in support of Black Lives Matter. And I mean, it was interesting. A lot of associates and nurses and doctors came down to do it. But I thought it was important to the approach that the organization took was that they want to do better in being a resource or a conduit for Black and brown people to have the access to healthcare they don't, to do more in educating their community. So they took us, here's where we can be powerful. But we also should take a moment to know that there is an issue here that we want to say that we support. And I thought that piece was, it
Yeah.
seemed at least remotely, genuine, I suppose.
Yes.
Everyone
Yeah.
who spoke to it seems like they really meant it. And you weren't forced to come down. So, people made a choice to come down to participate, but you have some people that just refuse to get the nature of what it's saying. And I will tell you this flat out from being respectfully in my job in the emergency department. I have seen how Black and brown people are treated entirely different
Oh yeah.
than people who are white being brought in by law enforcement.
Oh
Seriously.
yes.
Huge difference. I was like, someone would tell me that this isn't real, but I know what I'm seeing.
Yes. It's real. It's real. Let me just go here for a minute because we only have a few more minutes left. I'm trying to be in my life at this point in my life very solution focused. And I think about what what is the solution? Or can we get close to a solution? I have my thoughts and I can tell you what I appreciate to remedy, deal with this, address it. What are your thoughts, Scott and Maya, on how we can be change agents? Because this is traumatizing people. When you think about this stereotype and what it does and the damage it causes, Maya, you are a mental health professional. You can speak to the damage suppressing who you are causes over time. Hell, if you can't be angry anywhere, it's going to come out somewhere.
But the problem is, I would tell people to ask yourself a question. Why do you think people are so angry? What is there to be angry about? Where's the root of the anger? Where's the source of it? Where is it coming from? Why do you feel the stereotype exists? Where does it come from? That's the first question you should ask. So if you have something that historically has traveled for decades with a group of people, you should ask yourself, there must be a reason for why they're angry. And
Yeah.
that's the case with, if you see a person who seems balanced and happy, why are they happy? What's going on? What's
Right.
what's working for them, because I want a piece of that too. That's the question you should be asking, is whatever is eliciting the emotion, whether it's positive or negative, you should want to know where it comes from. Everything has a source. So to me, until we start to have the conversation about, which we've never had, by the way, we've never had any real salient conversations in this country about anything. Everything gets a Band-Aid. We do a couple things, maybe pass a couple laws, pass out some money, and we assume things get better.
Mhm.
But it doesn't really work like that, because if we're not changing people to understand what's happening and how you receive others, how you respect or treat others, then we're going to keep having the same problem when it's all said and done.
Yes.
So do I think it's something that's fixable? Yes, but first you must make people, the new term is woke.
Mm.
It's kind of like, like, if I'm a big fan of, like, sci-fi stuff. If you ever watch Dune, he talks about the sleeper has awakened. And that's the thing. We're a country that's not necessarily woke. We all of a sudden are a bit more aware that something's
Yeah.
that has been right in front of our eyes the entire time about a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. But to me, when I say when you're woke, it's like you are really dialed into what exactly is going on, which means it's going to be a whole lot of maybe not liking something that you learn about, something in your history. It doesn't even mean it's necessarily you. Or maybe you have been a person that's guilty of treating people that way without even realizing, because we've normalized such bad behavior.
It
Respectfully,
is.
we've normalized a lot of things. Like, I had a person in my job the other day comes over and goes, Maya, the song on the radio. She goes, what does WAP mean? Because I know you'd know. And I looked at her and I said, why do you think I know? Because I happen to be black and two black women sing the song. And then she looked at me. I said, what happens if I don't know? Turns out I know, but that's not the point. I wanted to let her know, but I've also known her since I was a kid because her family went to the
Yeah.
same grade school. So I
Yeah.
know why she came to me and approached me that way. But I also think be careful, because some people will get offended. Like, why do you think I know that?
That's exactly. I agree with what you're saying. And let me offer this too. And Scott, I want to hear your thoughts too when I'm done. You know, one of the missing pieces that I see in all of this is people really, everybody reflecting back on their own behaviors, their own values, their own like lens and ways of seeing things. What changed for me as the world erupted several months ago around race is when I got woke to how my black behind was contributing to maintaining systemic racism. And
Mm-hmm.
what I got real woke to, Maya, is how I bought into let me maintain my middle class lifestyle and keep these white folks comfortable and not say anything, because if I open my mouth, what's going to happen? Yes, they are going to get angry and I'll probably lose my job, and that will mean, what will it mean? I'm woke to what it means now. It means I go get another job. But for a long time, I made that mean, oh, my life would be over. So I think my ask of people, and this is part of the work that Scott and I do, is really helping people get present to themselves. That's all of us reflecting back
Mm-hmm.
on yourself and taking time to do that. I think if we do more of that, that can start impacting changes we need to see around race. Because one of the things that I can say I have resented when I bring things to people's attention, the obliviousness to like, oh, really, Nasiah?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, really. But there's just this lack of awareness that I think there's some power in reflecting back on self, thinking about why we do some of the things we do. Because I see this wokeness, this sudden wokeness. But I also see that the same people who are going to march, the so-called allies in Black Lives Matter, are the same people who won't stand with me if they see me being discriminated against on the job, who won't stand with me when somebody in their family makes a racist joke. It's real easy. It feels good to be out marching and protesting. But what I need is for people to reflect back on themselves close to home, not out there. I'm talking about right in here where
Mm-hmm.
we're at. First with the person in the mirror, then the people in your environment. Reflect on where you're working at, because it's so easy to other this, other it.
Mm-hmm. Very
So
true.
that's my thought. Scott, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
God, I have so many thoughts. Um, one thing that I see is somehow we got to get white people really um, in touch with, in kind of an experiential way, of like what the cost of this is, right? Because like you guys feel it and feel it pretty directly, and I don't think we do, you know. Um, and I expect it's there, right? Like just the cost of bias, racism, it just bias really
Hmm.
is, and like you kind of said it, like a fear of the other
Yes.
has a huge cost, right? It's like, like as long as I'm afraid of black people to some degree or another, it limits where I can go in the world. It limits my expression. Like it, and I might not see it. You know what I'm saying? Like I might just get a little like this, a little tighter, and not even be present to it, but it's there, right?
Yes.
And I think probably like why Black Lives Matter is such a threat to people is because we're in this kind of like it occurs for us like tranquility, but it's probably more like tranquilized,
Mm.
right? But it's a threat to the so oh that's good. Um, like it's a threat to the tranquility because it is like just like leave me alone. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
like things are okay. I don't feel it too much. Um, if people got present to that, it's really not tranquility. It really is more like tranquilized
Hmm.
and and really legitimate. And this goes well beyond the world of race. Like this is how people live their lives. Really, is like it's more like sleepwalking through the days. You know,
Hmm.
and it's why people miss the good old days because they were kids and and then at some point they got tranquilized, right?
Hmm.
um so I think like waking people up to the cost of that. Now see, that's kind of where, and you and I, Nasiah, have had this conversation before. It's kind of like, how do we get people to wake up to that, right? Like how do we get people to wake up to that? um
Hmm.
and I don't know that I have the answer there. Well, I kind of have some of the answers there because I do some of this work where I help people kind of like wake up to maybe not their biases around race, but their biases, and see how they're impacting them. Like my what I'm really interested in is like how do we get people interested in that, you
Hmm.
know? Because there is something about the collapse between tranquility, like mistaking tranquility
Hmm.
when you're really tranquilized, and people like being like, you know what? I think I'm cool being tranquilized. I don't know if they'd say it that way, but living that way, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and then the other thing I was going to say, well, I actually had written a little note down here, but I think one thing, but then you just kind of untied that shoelace, I guess, was I was going to say, like, you got to get an ally. But like what you pointed to was that it's one thing to be an ally when it's kind of interesting, like I want to go check out the protest, right?
Yes.
Versus like actually like putting your neck out there in the workplace, when
Hmm.
me opening my mouth like could
Yes.
have my boss say, oh well, you're the like
Yeah.
that's really risking something. Like it's not really risking anything to go to a protest.
Yeah.
But for me to say like, hey, I don't think, uh, like you called Nasiah aggressive and angry. You don't say that about
Yes.
Veronica over there, and she has no problem, like
Hmm.
And the difference I see is color, right? Um,
Yes.
and then that too, I think again that kind of that circles back to what I was saying about like how do we get people interested in waking up? Because I think again it's easy to say like, oh, I'll go be an ally, but it's like to put your neck out, it's kind of like you got to get a little sick of the status quo,
Hmm.
right? And I don't think we're present to the what the quo costs us. I don't think us white people are present to like how
Yeah.
real the cost of the status quo is. I think it's just so the water we swim in that
Yeah.
yeah.
I do. Thank you both for that. And this is what I say. I just want to end this on allyship because we talk a lot about allies, and I've gotten real clear in the last 6 months on who my allies are.
Hmm.
I do not want these fair weather allies. If anybody is out there calling themselves my ally, understand, unless you are willing to share the burden, the inconvenience, and the detriment this oppression has caused me and people that look like me, stay where you're at. Because what you do is you contribute to the problem. My allies have to be in the thick of it with me. If you cannot put your mouth on me when you see somebody, and this is a conversation I had with the folks in my workplace, if you see somebody kicking my ass and you won't jump in and say, stop it, I don't need you. I'm too far along in the game for that. Stay behind. So I welcome. There's some of us who say I don't need an ally. I welcome allies, but be clear that just because you like my Facebook post does not make you my ally. Just because you are marching in Black Lives Matter does not make you my ally. Just because you view my YouTube videos, you are not my ally. You are my ally if you can share the burden of what all of this is. That's what I need, and that is where I will end. Do you do you have anything else to offer, either of you?
I think you're spot on with that.
Okay.
Spot on.
Well, listen, what I'm going to do, Maya will connect,
Okay.
and I'll make sure all of your information is linked to this video. This
Okay.
was a good one. I think, did you want the recording too, Maya?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
You can
Yes.
have the recording. I think I'm also going to post this on Ulezi LLC and, of course, Pivot to Inclusion. Um, I want to thank everybody who is watching. Continue to do the work, reflect, and be a real, not performative ally. Thank you so much from Pivot to Inclusion, and we will see you next time.